Journey Whitfield had 4 minutes to pack 6 months of her life into one suitcase, and every second of it happened in front of an audience. The staff of the Kang estate lined the marble hallway like witnesses at a trial, none of them meeting her eyes, all of them whispering the same word: thief. Security stood by the door with her purse already searched and her badge already taken, and still she held her chin up like a woman who had done nothing wrong, because she hadn't. Her heels clicked against the marble with a steadiness she did not feel, each step echoing louder than every whisper behind her. 12 hours earlier, Kang Joon-ho had trusted her with the code to his family safe. Now he stood at the top of the staircase and looked at her like a stranger who had broken into his own home. "I want her gone before my son wakes up," he said. He didn't ask her to explain. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Journey standing in the house she had come to love, holding a suitcase and swallowing down something that felt a lot like her whole heart breaking in half. Before we go any further, comment your city below, because what you're about to see will test everything you believe about who really deserves the benefit of the doubt. Let's go back to the beginning so you understand exactly what Journey lost that morning, and why it mattered so much more than a job. 6 months earlier, Journey was working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night, trying to save enough to finish the nursing degree she had paused when her father got sick. She was 28 years old, sharp, steady, and used to being underestimated the second she walked into a room. When the agency called about a live-in position at the Kang estate, caring for the 6-year-old son of one of Empire City's most private and powerful men, she almost said no. Families like that didn't usually want someone who looked like her raising their children. But the pay was 3 times what she made at either job combined, and her mother's medical bills were not going to pay themselves. So she packed one bag, said yes, and promised her mother she'd call every single Sunday. It was a promise she never once broke. The boy's name was Min-jae. 6 years old, small for his age, 2 years out from losing his mother and 8 months into a battle with leukemia that had already taken his hair once and threatened to take it again. He barely spoke the first week Journey was there. He simply watched her, the careful way children watch adults once they've learned that people leave. It was Journey who broke through, not with pity but with patience. She learned his favorite stories by heart. She sat with him through chemo appointments his father could not always attend. She sang low and off-key when the fevers came at night, because he had once told her, in a rare unguarded moment, that his mother used to sing to him too, and he missed it more than he could say. There was a Tuesday in the 3rd month when he handed her a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun and told her quietly that one of them was her. Journey excused herself to the hallway so he would not see her cry. Kang Joon-ho noticed. 31 years old, CEO of Kang Innovations, a man who had built an empire out of grief and discipline after losing his wife 2 years earlier in a car accident, he still could not bring himself to discuss. Not even with the executives who had known him for a decade. He was not an easy man to impress and even harder to move. But he watched his son laugh again for the first time in over a year, and he watched Journey do it without ever trying to be noticed for it, and something in the ice around his own heart had quietly, cautiously begun to thaw. He started coming home earlier. He started asking her opinion on things that had nothing to do with the job. He told himself it was gratitude. It was already something more than that, and some nights, alone in his study, he almost admitted it to himself. Then came the night everything fell apart. Joon-ho was stuck in an emergency board meeting overseas, his assistant unreachable, and he needed a signed document from the safe in his study before a deadline that could not wait. He called Journey. He gave her the code himself, walked her through it over the phone, told her exactly where to find the folder. She did precisely what he asked, nothing more. She never so much as glanced at anything else inside that safe. But when the head housekeeper, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Pemberton, who had wanted her own goddaughter placed in Journey's position from the very start, went to polish the safe the next morning, she found the ring box sitting open. Empty. Inside had once been the 18-carat engagement ring that belonged to Joon-ho's late wife, the ring he had sworn in his own private grief he would give one day to whichever woman was brave enough to love both him and his son completely. Mrs. Pemberton did not wait for questions. She went straight to Joon-ho with only one name in her mouth, the only outsider who had been given that code all night. He came home from his trip a different man than the one who had left it. He did not ask Journey what happened. He did not ask to hear her side. Grief has a way of making even careful men reckless, and Junho had spent 3 years guarding himself and his son against being hurt by anyone new. It was easier in that moment to believe the worst about a woman he had let himself grow close to, than to sit with the possibility that he had misjudged someone again and would have to live with that. So he did the only thing that felt safe. He fired her on the spot, and told security to make certain she was gone before Min-jae woke up and asked where she had gone. Quick question before we go on. If you were Journey, fired, humiliated, and completely innocent, would you have walked away or stayed? Hit like right now if you already know your answer. Journey did not go far. She sat in her car outside the estate gates for almost an hour, telling herself to drive home, and unable to make her hands turn the key. She kept thinking about Min-jae's chart, still open on her nightstand upstairs, the one that tracked his temperature every 4 hours because his oncologist had warned that even a small fever, this close to his next round of treatment, could turn into an emergency fast. She told herself it was not her problem anymore. She told herself a lot of things that night that turned out not to be true. At 2:47 in the morning, her phone rang. It was the housekeeper's daughter, one of the only people on staff who had never once treated her like a threat, whispering that Min-jae had spiked a fever of 104, that an ambulance was already on its way to Empire City Children's Hospital, that his father was 40 minutes out by helicopter, and that the boy was screaming for someone named Jojo, which was what he had taken to calling Journey since the day he could not pronounce her name correctly, and she had simply let him keep. She did not think. She drove. By the time Junho landed and burst through the doors of the pediatric ward, still in his suit from the board meeting, terrified, already rehearsing in his head how he would explain to his late wife's memory that he had lost their son too, he stopped cold in the hallway outside room 214. Because there, in the dim light, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed with a fired employee's badge still sitting useless in her purse on the floor, was Journey. Min-jae's small hand wrapped tightly around 2 of her fingers. Her voice low and steady, singing the same off-key lullaby she always sang, while a nurse adjusted his and his fever finally began to break. The monitor beside the bed had been flashing red numbers 40 minutes earlier. Now it held steady, and the nurse caught Junho's eye in the doorway and gave him the smallest, most exhausted nod, the kind that means the worst of it has passed, at least for tonight. She looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. She did not apologize. She did not explain herself or beg for her job back, or ask him to reconsider what he had decided that morning. She simply said quietly, "He asked for me. I wasn't going to make him wait for someone who loves him." Then she looked back down at his son and kept singing, as if the last 12 hours had never happened at all. Junho stood in that doorway for a long time. Everything he thought he knew about her, about himself, about how quickly he had been willing to believe the worst, cracked wide open in that moment. He had spent his whole life being certain about people. He had never once felt more wrong. Before the truth comes out, comment below who you think really took that ring. Because it is not who anyone watching expects. The truth came out 3 days later, and it came from the last place anyone thought to look. Min-jae was recovering, his fever broken, his color slowly returning, and Journey, reinstated at Junho's quiet and humbled request, though she had made him work for that apology, was helping the nurses change his hospital bedding when she picked up his stuffed bear, the same worn brown bear he had carried since before his mother died, meaning only to move it to the chair. It felt heavier on one side than it should have. She unzipped the small tear in its back seam, the one Min-jae always insisted on fixing himself with tape, and found, wrapped carefully in a piece of tissue paper, his late mother's engagement ring. Journey did not say a word at first. She carried the bear to Min-jae's bed and sat beside him, and asked him gently, the way you ask a child something you already suspect will break your heart, why the ring had been hiding there. And 6-year-old Min-jae, clutching his bear tightly, finally told her what he had been too afraid to tell anyone. He had overheard his father months earlier, telling his grandmother that the ring was meant for whichever woman was brave enough to love him and his son both, completely, someday. Terrified that some stranger would show up one day and take his father's love without wanting him the way Journey did. He had taken the ring from the safe the very night his father called her with the code, while she was still on the phone, distracted, reading the folder aloud, and hidden it in the one place he trusted most. "I didn't want a stranger to have it," he whispered, his small hand tightening on the bear's worn paw. I wanted to keep it safe until I knew for sure. Are you mad at me, Jojo? He had not meant to steal it. He had only meant to keep it safe until he was certain the person who received it would love them both right. And the whole time everyone searched for a thief, he had watched Journey take the blame for something he had done, and said nothing because he was scared, and because 6-year-olds do not always understand that silence has a cost. Journey had known something. Not about the ring itself. She truly had not known where it went. But she had noticed that first terrible morning, how pale and quiet Min-jae had gone the instant the word stolen was said out loud. How he flinched every time someone mentioned the safe. She had a feeling. But she had made a promise to a grieving, frightened little boy weeks earlier that whatever he told her in confidence would stay between them, and she had chosen, knowing full well it might cost her everything, to keep that promise rather than throw a traumatized child under suspicion to save her own reputation. When Junho heard the truth, something in him broke and rebuilt itself in the same instant. He thought of the woman he had humiliated in front of his entire staff. He thought of how she had stood in that hallway with a suitcase and never once, not even to defend herself, considered exposing his son's secret. He understood, finally, exactly what kind of woman he had accused of being a thief, and exactly what kind of woman she actually was. Mrs. Pemberton, whose rush to judgment, and whose none-too-subtle campaign to get her own goddaughter hired into Journey's place, had fanned the entire accusation into a fire, was let go within the week. But Junho did not stop there, because he knew an apology, even the loudest one, would never be enough on its own. He found her in the hospital cafeteria the next morning, and for the first time since she had met him, Kang Junho, a man who ran boardrooms with a single look and had not said the word sorry to another adult in 3 years, sat down across from her and said it 4 separate times before he could finish a full sentence. He told her he had let his own fear write a story about her that had nothing to do with who she actually was. He told her that in 8 months of watching her love his son without asking for anything in return, she had done something he thought had died along with his wife. She had made their house feel like a home again. And he told her quietly that he did not just want his son's nanny back. He wanted her. All of her. For as long as she would let him. Journey did not answer right away. She had spent 6 months proving her worth to people who should have trusted her from the start, and she was not about to hand her heart over without first making sure it was safe there. But she also knew exactly what she had felt, standing in that hospital room with his son's small hand in hers, when Junho had looked at her like the ground had shifted underneath him. So she told him the truth. That she had fallen for him somewhere between the late nights and the fevers and the terrible coffee in his office, and that it terrified her, and that she was willing to find out what it meant anyway. One last thing before we finish this story. If you believe people deserve more than the worst assumption ever made about them, subscribe and tell me which moment broke you first, because this family had to learn that the hard way. A year later, Empire City Children's Hospital held its spring gala. The very same one Junho used to attend alone, writing checks and leaving early because the room reminded him too much of losing his wife there. This time he did not leave early. He stood near the center of it with his hand laced through Journey's, both of them dressed for the evening, watching Min-jae, his hair fully grown back, cancer-free for 6 months and counting, sprint across the room to show off the new baseball glove Journey had bought him, still calling her Jojo, though lately, whenever he introduced her to strangers, he had started calling her something else entirely. Mom. Later that night, back home, Junho opened the small velvet box he had kept locked away since the night everything nearly fell apart. The very same ring, cleaned, reset, reclaimed from a story about theft and quietly rebuilt into a story about trust. He got down on one knee in the same hallway where his staff had once watched Journey carry a suitcase out the front door, and asked her to stay in that house, in that family, in his life for good, this time with his son standing right there beside them both, holding the ring box himself, finally getting to hand it over to the woman he and his father had chosen all along. Down that same hallway, half the staff who had once watched her leave in silence stood watching now too, and this time nobody whispered thief. They simply watched a family become whole. She said yes before he even finished asking the question.